Hello everybody, I'm Cameron and welcome back to another lesson in Python. Today we're going to be talking about inputs. So what is an input? You're going to be basically taking a value from the user to use in your program. So it could be as simple as taking their name. Let's do that, and we're going to make a variable and let's call this user. Let's just call it username, right? Now that's simple enough. And we're going to say that username is going to be equal to input. That's actually all we use is input like that, and we put our two parentheses because we're not actually inserting anything yet. So we could just leave these blank for now. And let's then print username, and then we'll put is your name. So it's going to just print that out. It's going to print your name back to you after you enter the name. So let's run. And my name's Cameron, so I'm going to type down Cameron down here now. Notice how now I can type down here in this little box. And this is green. It might be a different color for you if you're on a different IDE, or if you use a different, if you use light mode instead of dark mode, it might be a different color. But as you can see, it's got that italicized text, and it's a different color to signify that this is information that I'm entering in right now. And once you're done typing in a value, you press the enter key. And now that moves on to the next code. So right now, our code is actually at a halt. As soon as you get up to a point where there's an input here, you need to actually enter in the information, and then you need to press the enter key before it moves on to the next line of your code. So I'm going to press enter now, and then it says back to me, Cameron is your name. Now keep in mind, this print statement, we have these two different values, one of them being the variable, and the other value being the string that I just put here. And they're separated by this comma. Now, by default, sep is equal to a space. So that's why I put that space here. Just a little refresher for you guys. But yeah, it tells me back my name. And, if we want to use, let's also print down here. Let's print the type. So by default, and I just want to demonstrate this to you guys, Python is going to take in variables as a string. So let's run this again, and I'm going to type in Cameron again, and obviously Cameron is a string, right? That's a word that uses letters, but if we go ahead and we run this again, and let's say I'm going to make my name 100, it's going to still make that a string. So that could be bad in some cases. Like, let's say instead of asking for my name, we wanted to deal with some sort of mathematical operation. So let's say we want to, let's get rid of this. Let's say my number equals input. And we want to add 10 to it. So let's make another value. And we're just going to call this plus 10. And that's going to be equal to my number plus 10. And now we want to print plus 10. Simple enough, right? All we're doing is we're adding 10 to whatever number the user enters. So let's say I just want to type in 10. So my answer should be 20. We get an error. And we get an error because, once again, like in the last video we were talking about this problem, it's taking this in as a string, not an integer, and then it's trying to add it to an integer. You can't add a string to an integer. So how do we fix this problem? We could actually use the keyword int. So before our input, we want to type in int, and we put our parentheses here, and we put our end parenthesis there. And now this input is converted into an integer. So if we do that and we run this program again, and I type in 10, it's now going to return us 20, because now the type of my number is made into an integer, and we're adding an integer to an integer, which it can do, and it'll return as an integer. So that's cool and all, but what if we want to say something to the user? What if we want to tell them, hey, you're going to be typing something in right now, right? Because that's a little bit weird that it's just blank. If you're trying to make a program, you want to say something to the user so they know what they're supposed to enter in. So how do we give them a little message? We could actually put that inside the parentheses and input. So inside here, we could do that. We put our quotes, and now we have a string, so we could type whatever we wanted to here. So I'm going to say enter a number, and I'm going to give that, and let's try that running again. And now look at that, enter a number, and since I put that extra space right here up there, it starts a space after that. So now we could just type in, let's just type in 1, and there we go, we got 11 back. Now, if I want to do a new line, so it says this little message, and then it puts the cursor to type on the next line, I could just do that. I could put this command in there right there. And now if we run it again, see how it puts my cursor underneath. So now we could just do 2, and there we go. It returns us 12. So yeah, guys, there you go. Keep in mind that by default, it's always going to take in inputs as strings. Sometimes you'll want it to be a string. Sometimes you really do not want it to be a string, and you want it to be a number. So if you want it to be a number, you go ahead, integer for, obviously for, if it's not a decimal, you put int. If you want it to be a floating point, though, like let's say we want it to be a decimal, it's not going to work if we put in a decimal. So let's just change it to float. And now we could run it again. So if we put 0.5, or oops, I typed in a slash by mistake. There we go. So using that float or integer keyword, float or int at the beginning, and we always have to put that in parentheses, then we can make our inputs into the correct data type. What we could also do is if, let's say we didn't have that here, right? And we just had our variable. It's going to take this variable in as a string right now. But we could also do float here. So this will actually convert the variable into a float within this expression. So if we don't take it in as a integer or float at first, we can just put that float here. And that way, if we do 0.5, then it'll work. So yeah, that's another way you could do it. It really depends on if you want this variable to always be a number, or if you just want it to be a number for this calculation here. But there you go, guys. That is the basics of taking in inputs in Python. Why don't you play around with it? Try to put in different stuff here in this little message. It could be whatever you want it to be, but I definitely recommend either ending with that colon or doing it on a new line, something like that, something nice. And yeah, there you go. I'll see you in the next one.